Hello, and welcome back to Baby Elias's stories. We now return to Quinn by Iris Johansen. Chapter 15. Gallo crossed to the connecting door and looked at Catherine curled up under the covers like a cat. She was sleeping hard, having gone to sleep within 5 minutes of the time that she had pulled the sheet over her 2 hours ago. Her breathing was light and steady, and her sleep was deep and sound. Yet he'd bet that if she sensed anything that was unexpected, she'd be awake in a heartbeat. As he would be, Gallo thought. Her CIA training and his years in the Rangers had given them both a military mindset that would probably remain with them the rest of their lives. Now it was strange thinking of Catherine as a soldier. Her competence was superlative, beyond question, but he could no longer think of her as the hunter who had stalked him through the forest. He was too aware of her as a woman. Shit. Aware. Understatement. He had trouble looking at her and not remembering her naked, wet, and shimmering in the sunlight. When she had come out of the water, there had been drops of water on her breasts and nipples, and he had wanted to bend down and lick them, make them taut and ready, then move between her legs and put his hands. Hell, he was getting hard just thinking about that moment, and this moment too. He was lying there helpless, asleep, and there was a cat-like grace about her. But like a cat, he could imagine her moving beneath him, fierce, sensual, springing forward and taking what she wanted, as she had wanted to do at the lake. Damn it, she had wanted him as much as he had wanted her. Stop. Block it, as he had done since they had started in search of Jacobs. So what if he wanted her more than any woman he'd wanted in years? Screwing her wouldn't be good for either one of them. Wouldn't be good? What was he thinking? It would be fantastic. Maybe in the short term, but she didn't deserve any more complications. God knows he was too scarred to have a decent relationship with any woman. He had come close to almost destroying Eve years ago. And Bonnie. But Catherine had said he hadn't destroyed Bonnie. He closed his eyes as the pain washed over him. God, he hoped Catherine was right, that he hadn't accepted what she had said because he wanted it to be so. But for that reason alone, he should be thinking of Catherine with gratitude and not as a sexual object. Not likely. He was too damn selfish, and he wanted her too much. But he could perhaps put off moving to satisfy that selfishness for a little while. Keep busy. Find Jacobs. His lids flipped open, and he turned away from the door and moved toward the window in his room. Let that Mercedes be there. He pulled back the drape. No Mercedes in the lot. Damn it. Where the hell was the... But he caught a glimpse of silver out of the corner of his eye. Around the side of the hotel in the far parking lot, he took his binoculars out of his suitcase. Be sure. A shadowy figure at the wheel. Light shirt, dark hair, brawny shoulders. No reason for anyone to be sitting in the parking lot at 1 a.m. Jason or Nixon. It didn't matter. He let the drapes fall back, turned and glided silently toward the door to the hall. prey. Catherine woke with a start. Darkness, silence, something was wrong. No Gallo. She swung her feet to the floor and jumped out of bed. She ran into his bedroom. She hadn't expected him to be there, but his suitcase was open and on the bed. Binoculars on the table by the window. She grabbed them and thrust the drapes aside. Damn you, Gallo. She lifted the glasses and scanned the parking lot. Nothing. No, to the far side. She threw the binoculars down, ran back to her room and slipped on her shoes. Then she was running out of her room. No time for the elevator. She took the steps 2 at a time as she ran down to the lobby and out onto the parking lot. She stopped short. Gallo and a dark-haired man were wrestling on the ground beside the driver's side of the Mercedes. As she watched, Gallo flipped him over and climbed astride him. His arm encircled the man's neck. Gallo's face was flushed, his lips pulled back and revealing his teeth. Savage, animalistic anger and something else close to bloodlust twisted his features. She remembered he had killed Paul Black with that very hold. Gallo, she said through her teeth, don't you kill him until we find out what we need to know. He looked up at her, and for a moment she thought he would ignore her. Then he drew a deep breath, and his arm loosened from around the man's neck. I'm not going to kill him. Yet. He jerked the knife from the man's grasp. He nicked me and made me a little upset. She could see the blood in Gallo's forearm. Nick seemed a good description for the wound. He didn't hurt you. She came forward and stood over Gallo and the man. And if he did, you deserved it, you bastard. You left me without a word. Her gaze shifted to the man who was glaring up at her. Who is he, Nixon or Jason? Why don't we ask him? Gallo pressed the edge of the knife against the man's throat. Answers. I want answers. Name. Humphrey. The knife brought blood. Name. Nixon. Very good. Now where is Thomas Jacobs? I don't know. He gasped with pain as the knife bit again. Ah! I tell you I don't know. He hired me to watch his place and report back to him. He was expecting you to go after him when he heard about Queen's death. Report back? That's all? For the time being, there might have been additional work later. He was going to consider it. His lips curled. I don't think the son of a bitch could afford me. I wouldn't have even taken the job if I hadn't been having a slow month. A slow month, Catherine repeated. What constitutes a slow month in the assassination game, Nixon? Where is Jacobs? Gallo asked again. 1 minute. He was stalling me. He said he'd decide in 2 days. Nixon went on quickly, his gaze on the knife. That probably meant he had to find a way to score before he could pay me. He did it once before, when he had me take care of one of the bosses at the casino in Atlantic City. The bastard always thought he could beat the tables. Sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't. But he was always sure he was going to make the big score. That's not enough, Gallo said. More. Jacobs is going to have to disappear for a while, and it's going to take cash. He'd need money to pay you and to find a place to lie low from the police. Where would he go to get the money? How do I know? He didn't. He cursed as the blood started to run down his neck as Gallo's knife bit deep. Maybe New Orleans. He told me once he lost his shirt in Atlantic City and the pit bosses were all crooks. He said that next time he was going back to New Orleans, where he always won big. When did he say that? 6 months ago. Not when he set you up to do this job? No, he didn't mention anything. Gallo looked at Catherine. What do you think? I don't know. I think he's telling the truth. I'm not sure. His grasp tightened on the knife. Nixon gasped. Let me go. I'll find out for sure and set him up for you. What good is it going to do you to slit my throat? Good point, Catherine said. Let him make a call and see if Jacobs trusts him enough to tell him what we need to know. Pity. Gallo took the knife away and got to his feet. I was beginning to enjoy myself. Nixon hurriedly sat up. You'll let me go if I get you what you want? I didn't say that, Gallo said. We don't need him. He's not going to call Jacobs back and tip our hand. She stared Nixon in the eye. Because he knows we'd be after him and never give up. It wouldn't be good business, would it, Nixon? No. He moistened his lips. I don't care about Jacobs. Why should I? You shouldn't care. As I said, it's not good business. She backed away from him. Get in your car and turn the speaker on your phone so that Gallo can hear loud and clear. She turned to Gallo. I'll take a turn around the parking lot and make sure that we haven't disturbed any of the hotel employees or guests while you keep Nixon company. Why should they be disturbed? I was very quiet. He didn't even scream. He opened the driver's door and smiled. But I agree that I should be the one to babysit him. We've grown so close. We're almost like family. Family. Maybe the Borgias. She moved away from the car and strolled across the parking lot. She doubted if their encounter with Nixon had attracted attention. It had seemed to go on for a long time, but it had actually taken only a few moments. It was the middle of the night, but there was always the chance that someone had glanced out the window or that a motel employee had come out for a cigarette. At any rate, she had to check out possible problems before they erupted to become real problems. They had to move fast to find Jacobs and certainly didn't need trouble with the police. She was striding back to the Mercedes 10 minutes later. Nixon was just hanging up his cell phone. She glanced at Gallo. Well? New Orleans. Cadallan Casino, Gallo said. He was on his way to the airport. Jacobs promised Nixon that he'd have his blood money by day after tomorrow, he added. Actually, Nixon handled it very well. He displayed a wonderful mixture of greed and venom. Jacobs didn't suspect a thing. You said I could go, Nixon said. You know where Jacobs is heading. I did everything you asked. That's true, Gallo said. But it was clearly Catherine who said we'd let you go. I really don't approve of let him go, Catherine said. We don't have time to deal with him. Gallo shrugged. Whatever you say. He stepped back and gestured to Nixon. Run along. Frankly, I'd make time to deal with you, but if we experience any backlash, I may still get my way. Nixon muttered a curse, but he was frantically starting the car and screeching out of the parking space. Gallo was gazing regretfully after him. You know that he'll come after us eventually. But it will take time for him to get over the first intimidation, Catherine said. You frightened him. She turned away as Nixon peeled out of the parking lot. I can see why Quinn thought you were so valuable when you worked for him as a special agent. He said that there were moments when you were like an ancient Viking with a bloodlust on you. He called you a berserker. You can be, she stopped, searching for the right word. Frightening? He fell into step with her as she moved toward the glass door. Did I frighten you, Catherine? No. She opened the door. But I found it interesting to watch you. I couldn't decide whether you were bluffing or if you really wanted to kill him. I don't bluff. Nixon is scum. Would I have cut his throat? He smiled recklessly. You seem to think I'm better than I think I am. So I believe I'll let you wonder. You're good with a knife. Is that your weapon of choice? I find it effective. Most people have experience with being cut and fear it. Guns are more impersonal. What about you? Sometimes a knife is necessary, but I prefer being impersonal," she added. "Except when I'm dealing with someone I hate." "Like Rakovac?" She nodded. "I would have made him suffer as much as a victim of the Spanish Inquisition if I'd had the time. I wanted to take it slow. If you run across a similar situation, let me know. I've learned a lot from personal experience about the methods the Inquisition used in that period. I'll be glad to share." He started up the stairs. "I'll call and make our airline reservations to New Orleans." He stopped before entering his room. "Nixon should really have been eliminated. You know it as well as I do. It goes against your professionalism and my good judgment." "Why?" "Because she hadn't wanted to see Gallo do it. Yes, Nixon was scum and would cause them trouble, but she was holding on to her faith in Gallo by a very tentative grip. She had not been shocked by Gallo's savagery, but it had made her wary. Never mind. His gaze was on her face. "I think I know," he shrugged. "I couldn't expect anything else." "No, you couldn't." She went next door to her own room. "I should be ready to go in 10 minutes, but I'm going to call Venable and tell him where we're going and see if he can pave the way for us." "Good idea. 15 minutes then." But there was a missed call on her phone when she picked up her cell to call Venable. Eve. She stiffened, then drew a deep breath. She pressed the return call. "I just got your call. Did I wake you?" "No, we're not doing much sleeping right now." Eve was silent. "You said to start with the premise that we were wrong about Gallo being guilty and work from there. But can you do that, Eve?" "I'm trying. Joe says that we should trust you. That wasn't easy for him." She paused. "And either way, it's not easy for me. I trusted Gallo, and it hurt me to think that I'd been a fool. Perhaps that's one of the reasons that I was so stubborn about not changing my mind when you were defending him." "I can understand that," Catherine said. "And I can't tell you I'm 100% sure that I'm right. How can I be when Gallo isn't even sure? But I'm 75% sure. And before I'm done, I'm going to know." "You're going after Thomas Jacobs." "You bet I am. I see you put 2 and 2 together." "Joe and I decided he would be one of the only people who would know for certain why Quinn hired Paul Black to take the blame for Bonnie's killing. And we tracked you to the Chicago airport and found out there was a flight to the East Coast about the time I talked to you on the phone," she added, "non-stop to Washington, D.C. Have you contacted Jacobs yet?" "Not yet. We think he's on a flight to New Orleans. We're going to be right behind him." She hesitated, then asked the question. "What are you going to do, Eve?" "You mean, am I going to notify the police that they can pick up Gallo in New Orleans?" she asked. "No. Joe said I should trust you. Dear God, I want to trust you, Catherine. And I want to trust Gallo." She drew a shaky breath. "Joe left the hospital this morning. I'm going to talk to him now. But I think he's going to agree that we're not going to let the police interfere with what's between us. I imagine we'll see you in New Orleans." "I'm glad, Eve." "Don't be too happy. When Joe comes out of his coma, he said he thought we were heading toward the end. That Bonnie told him what was happening. But I just don't know." Her voice was uneven. "What I'm feeling is too damn tentative. I'm wobbling back and forth like a weather vane." "What about Jane? Is she coming?" "No, she's mad as hell, but I won't let her run the risk." Catherine could see that Jane would be angry as well as worried to death. She didn't impress me as someone who would take foolish chances. I agree that the situation may be pure hell. I've got a gut feeling that it probably will be. Joe almost lost his life, and we're headed for the end of the search. Jane's not going to be caught up in any of it, Eve said fiercely. I'll call you when we reach New Orleans. She hung up. Catherine slowly pressed the disconnect. We're headed toward the end. Bonnie told him that was happening. Bonnie again. Catherine seemed to be the only one who was not being affected by that small 7-year-old child who had died those many years ago. Joe, whom Catherine respected as a friend and professional, was evidently accepting the same bizarre concept as Eve and Gallo. Bonnie returned from the dead. Bonnie, the ghost, the beloved spirit. Catherine? Gallo had opened it, the connecting door, his gaze searching her expression. You all right? Yes. She glanced at her watch. Sorry, I haven't called Venable yet, but I can do it on the way to the airport. She threw her suitcase on the bed and started tossing items of clothing into it. This won't take me long. He leaned against the door jamb. I asked if you were all right. She nodded jerkily. That was Eve on the phone. She said she and Joe would see us in New Orleans. He went still. You told her? She said she wasn't going to call the police. She looked up from her packing. She's going to give us a chance, though she still has her doubts. I can't imagine. Because he still had his own doubts and was fighting desperately to put them aside. Catherine had a few doubts herself, damn it, but she wouldn't give up either faith or determination. If she was the only one driving this show, then so be it. Joe is on our side. She fastened the suitcase. Sort of. Maybe. I guess we take what we can get. When are our airline reservations? In another 3 hours. I could have gotten a connection through Atlanta a little earlier, but it would have only been arriving an hour before the stop. But it would have only been arriving an hour before the non-stop. An hour isn't going to make a difference. She picked up her suitcase. Let's go. But it turned out to be 9 hours. The entire Gulf Coast was fogged in, and their Delta flight had a 6-hour delay. They didn't arrive in New Orleans until close to noon. It was still damp and foggy when the plane landed at Louis Armstrong New Orleans International, and the forecast was for more heavy fog later in the day. Where do we go from here? Catherine asked as she retrieved her bag. Where's the casino? A high-rise off Bourbon Street or a riverboat on the river? Neither. It's outside the city. The Catalan is across the Mississippi and has a very exclusive clientele of jet-setters and high rollers. We'll register at the hotel as man and wife. We'll use the Brookman name I used on the airline ticket. He checked his watch. It's a little early for play, but in a few hours the casino should be humming. We should wait until after midnight to make a play, though probably Jacobs is at the tables right now. He's going to be very focused. You should know a lot about casinos. You made a great deal of money from them, didn't you? He nodded. I taught myself card counting in prison. It's the most valuable lesson I learned in that rat hole. It's going to be difficult extricating him from a crowded casino. Have you thought about a plan for taking him? A tentative plan? He smiled as he opened the door for her. But I'm sure that you have one that's not at all tentative. You were very quiet on the plane. She shrugged. Simplicity is best. We find out in what room he's playing. I go in, pretend to greet him. He falls unconscious, and we are very upset. He's obviously ill, and we have to get him to a hospital. We take him away from the casino. End of scene. Yes, very simple, Gallo said dryly. Up to the time that he falls unconscious. That might get a little complicated. One of your friend Hu Chang's magic potions? Hypodermic? She nodded. It will keep him out for at least 20 minutes. That should give us time to get him away from the casino. Gallo opened the passenger door of the rental car for her. Unless the casino manager wants to handle his transfer to the hospital himself to prevent liability issues. That's why I allowed 20 minutes. Otherwise, we could have Jacobs out of there in 7. I've had Venable send me a dossier on the manager of the casino. I'll study it and see how I can get around him. She looked at him as she got into the car. Or I'll let you handle it. I judge you're very good at manipulating people to suit yourself. I'll do everything else. You get us out of that casino before Jacobs wakes up. I'll work on it. He got into the driver's seat and started the car. Anything else? Yes. She took out a slip of paper from her notebook. Stop at this address on the way out of town. Neither of us has suitable clothes for that kind of casino. It's a boutique that will supply me with a gown that will make me look as if I belong in a casino frequented by the jet set. I told Venable to arrange for a tux for you too. It won't be designer, but it will be okay. I'm the one who all the attention will be focused on. You don't need a designer gown to garner attention. You walk into a room and every man will do a double take. That is true, she said calmly. Do you expect me to pretend modesty? That would be foolish. Good looks can be a valuable weapon. They can also be a handicap if you want to fade into the background. Either way, you have to accept what you are and make the most of it. I'll gladly accept what you are, he said softly. I celebrate it. Sensuality. She looked away from him, feeling the familiar rush of heat. How many men had hit her? How many men had hit on her through the years? Why was Gallo different? She didn't know, but she'd better learn to handle his effect on her. You'd better not celebrate anything until we get Jacobs, she said flatly. And I know you like the way I look. I'd have to be blind if I wasn't aware that I'd turn you on. But it doesn't mean anything. Looks don't matter. Looks don't matter. Age doesn't matter. What does matter, Catherine? Kindness, love, fighting for what you believe and the people you believe in. She paused. And again, knowing who you are. Admirable, he said quietly. We're alike on many levels. I'm just a bit more shallow and far more attuned to the physical. I'm afraid I can't get over that particular barrier. He paused. And I believe you may be having a few problems in that area too. It's been there since the first time we came together, and you've been trying to ignore it. But it keeps coming back, doesn't it, Catherine? Yes, she wouldn't lie to him. That would be a defeat in itself. But I'll find a way to not let it get in my way. That's not why we're together. No, we're together so that you can help Eve and bring me along for the ride. He was looking straight ahead. And I'm trying to stop being an ungrateful son of a bitch and forget how you looked in all your rotten leaves glory. I have to warn you, it's not working too well. He gestured to a street up ahead. I think that's where the address you gave me should be. Do you want me to wait or go inside with you? I have some calls to make to set up my part of our exit plan. She felt a little of her tension leaving. His voice was much more crisp, and it was obviously the end of the intimacy that had caused the tension. She was grateful to ignore anything connected to that intimacy at the moment. Honesty and boldness were fine, but she had to regroup and step back from Gallo. I'll go in alone. When the car pulled to the curb in front of the elegant stone house, she opened the door. If they need you to be measured for your tux, I'll give you a call. My fitting shouldn't take long. I'm a standard size and Venable knows my measurements. Venable must know a lot about you. How long did you say you've been together? He's my superior since I was 17. He recruited me. She slammed the car door and headed for the front entrance. And by the time I had Luke, he knew more about me than even my husband did. I was an agent, and that's all part of the job. If I'd been living with you long enough to have a child, I guarantee that no one would have known you better." He smiled and leaned back in the seat. "And to hell with the job." Cadalon Casino, 2:35 a.m. "I'm ready." Catherine came out of the bedroom into the sitting room and gazed at him critically. "You look very polished." "I was aiming at being very James Bond." He tilted his head. "I have to keep up with the competition. But 007 never had a Bond girl like you." She was totally breathtaking, he thought, as his gaze moved from the top of her shining dark hair to the silver heels peeping out of the slit in the dark burgundy strapless gown she wore. The golden skin of her shoulders and upper breast gleamed under the lights, and he wanted to reach out and touch her, stroke her. Exotic, sexy, and so vibrantly alive, she lit up the room. "I've always thought the Bond girls lacked a certain strength of will," she smiled. "But they usually manage to get things done. Did you locate Jacobs?" "He's playing blackjack and doing very well. He's excited about it. His cheeks are so flushed you'd think he had a fever." He opened the door to the hall. "Don't touch her. Not the time or place. I can stay out of Jacob's way until after you've taken care of him. But both he and Quinn must have read the dossier on you that they gave to me. The photo didn't do you justice, but he'll probably recognize you." "Then I won't give him time for it to register. I can't let him see me until the last minute." "He'd have to be distracted not to notice you." The hall was decorated in the same elegant 19th century decor as the rest of the hotel casino. Catherine looked like a splendid peacock strolling past the soft pastels of the wall hangings and faded amberson rugs, he thought. "But I'm sure that you'll find a way to do it." "I'm sure I will too," she said absently. "Eve just phoned me. I tried to call her earlier, but I got her voicemail. They've cancelled all the flights out of the Midwest to New Orleans, so they were on a plane to Atlanta. But they ran across the same problem there. They're waiting for a break in the weather. Damn this fog." "I thought she might be here by now." He gazed out the window at the thick mist that obscured everything beyond 2 feet. "It's as thick as any London fog." "Yes, I hoped it might lift before this." She got into the brass and beveled glass paneled elevator. "I'm glad that they're not here yet. I told them what we planned, but I don't want Joe and her coming into this mess until we have Jacob secure. If everything blows up in our faces, I don't want them involved." "But they are involved, Catherine. One might say more than you." He held up his hand to stop her from speaking. "Since we're almost sure that they won't make it before we're done here, I'm not going to worry about it, though I have plenty of time to devote to worrying since you haven't left me much else to do until after the finale. Where's your hypodermic? You'd have trouble hiding it in that gown." "It's under the nail of my right index finger." She glanced down at her gleaming scarlet nails. "It was the most practical place." The elevator doors opened, and they were assaulted by voices, music, glittering mirrors, and sparkling chandeliers. "The blackjack room is beyond the gold arches, to the left, table 3, Gallo said. "Right." She moved out of the elevator. "Give me a few minutes, then follow me." He nodded. "I'll let you make your entrance, but don't expect me to miss the performance. I've been looking forward to it." "I don't know why. I told you it's going to be short and simple." "Whatever you say." He watched her move across the brilliant foyer toward the blackjack room. He was far from the only person staring at Catherine. Who could help it? She was graceful, stunning, completely confident. She was as different as night and day from the fierce huntress who had stalked him in the woods. He wasn't sure which Catherine fascinated him more, and it was too soon to make a choice. He was certain that he'd be seeing other facets of her that would prove equally interesting, but for the moment He'd better follow her and be ready to step in and back her up when she needed him. It was a strange role for him. All his life, he had been a loner, and his missions had definitely been solo. Yet he had accepted Catherine's plan, which had not only put him in tandem with her, but in a semi-passive position. And he had done it with no resentment and even a touch of amusement. Strange.